That's going to be awkward for those poor kids
Mm-hmm.
in Indy.
Yeah, I know. I just saw that too. I'm like, oh my God.
All right. Tweet. And go live. Hey there. Welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on Hawk Fanatic. It is Thursday, July the 13th, a little after, it's 9:16 a.m. Scott and I did a lot of pre-podcast, pre-recording talk that you guys missed, probably the best conversation, but stay around here anyway, and we'll try to entertain you here. Joined by Scott Docterman, I am Rob Howe. And this is the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. As I mentioned, it is, as I said, July 13th. So not a lot of meat on the bone, but there's some particles on there that we'll pick at today in terms of Hawkeye sports. And pretty glad it's Thursday, Scott. I'm ready for this week to be over.
You know, the summer is supposed to be, it used to be, I guess, probably right before we got into this business. It used to be that time of year where guys took a month plus off, maybe then poked their head in the office for a week and then maybe did some PTL, and that's about it. Well, that doesn't exist anymore for a lot of us. And for me, this summer has been busier than the damn spring was. And that's even with the NFL draft. So I'm looking forward to football season so things can unwind. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk about it, but it's just like the Pat Fitzgerald Northwestern story was depressing. And then, we said goodbye to a friend earlier this week at his service, and then people going at each other in Des Moines with state politics. It's just been this week. You talk about like just, the focus on mental health in this country. And it just seems like there's so much negativity and, other stories we'll talk about here too. Fran McCaffrey's family, that was, it's just, it's not been a great week. So hopefully this is therapeutic for all of us, me included, to kind of get through the rest of this week. There has been good news. Caitlin Clark continues to shine and be recognized for her exploits. But I think we should probably start, Scott, with what's been a big conversation. I mean, I don't know if I've gone to a cookout or a 4th of July gathering, whatever I've done this summer, the McCaffrey story has come up and people ask about it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not, I've heard things, you've heard things. Now we have some closure here to a very, very sad and traumatic experience for a lot of people, and the unfortunate death of a near retirement National Guard Sergeant First Class in Corey Height. That's the ultimate and most prominent part of this story is somebody lost their life, and it's hard. It's hard to talk about it. It's hard to think about.
It sure is. And, we've heard obviously for almost 2 months about that incident and have intentionally kind of shied away from it until all the facts came out because of the nature of it. There was so much speculation, rumor, innuendo as to what happened, what Jack McCaffrey was doing. And, he was cited for hitting somebody in the crosswalk, which, I don't know where that's going to go. I won't speculate on what the legal maneuvering will be. But, ultimately, your first thought is the family of the, National Guardsman who passed. He's got 4 kids. He was married for 22 years. And he's 45 years old, just close to retirement from the National Guard. Just a tragedy of consequential, magnitude that you cannot replace. And so my sincere comments and thoughts and prayers to go out to him and his family, and have since this situation happened. And then you look at the other side with Jack McCaffrey and what a traumatic experience this is, and what was kind of mentioned more so in the McCaffrey family statement. But what we heard or learned along the way about somebody waving over a jogger on a busy street, and then Jack McCaffrey not seeing the jogger and hitting him in the other lane. And it kind of goes to safety, if nothing else. I mean, you want to be nice when you're driving, and sometimes, we all do that. And in Iowa, especially, it's not defensive. It's like passive defensive driving for some people, which is, no, you go, you go to a four-way stop, and it takes, 10 and a half minutes before people go. And then it's like, well, why'd you go?
And then there's the races around the roundabout.
Yeah.
I'm cutting you off on the round, that's just a complete anarchy.
Yeah. You got people who are aggressive and you got people who aren't driving. Well, this goes to show that anybody with the right of way that's not at a stop sign, don't stop. Just don't, unless you're on a 2-lane street and nobody's coming. It's just that's a sad byproduct, or part of this story too. So,
and that's you've driven that stretch, and that's not. It always seems like when people pass over, would that be First Avenue? No, Mormon Trek.
Yeah,
going west. Mm-hmm. It's like going towards City High. Most times those cars, you see, you're in like speed zones, and people will kind of do the speed limit a little bit under. Maybe that's one of those areas where people step on it and kind of flow through there. And it's a school. It's kind of I don't know. It's kind of a setup that's ripe for something like this, because it's 4 lanes, it's 35, and it goes past one of the bigger high schools in this part of the state. Yeah,
West High. And it's just really, again, you've got to be careful. And I'm not suggesting that the guardsman, he unfortunately, he's passed away. He probably did what most did. He was jogging and stopped, and somebody waved him across. But and I'm sure everyone, for a fraction of a second, would love to change to change everything they did. It's just what I don't like, and what I tried to prevent but it didn't work, was I fucking hate the commentary on this that people have had, which is that he didn't, that's pretty light for killing somebody, or somebody's always at fault. And I'm not saying that nobody was at fault here, but I just don't think that commentary is the right thing to do when we're trying to discuss this situation. It's just, I don't know, so, I tried to shut off comments on Twitter, and of course people just quote tweeted me, and then it just became this arguing over the penalties and what Jack should face. And then people ask me, well, is this why he doesn't want to go to Iowa? And I'm like, I really don't want to speculate on that, man. I mean, let's keep those things separate for today. Let's just this is a traumatic situation, and let's keep it at such. There'll be lots of time to talk about basketball, but let's keep it at this.
Yeah, and that's I think when you go down the road of, who's at fault, that we all do that. We want to know who's to blame for something and who's at fault. But if you just take what we know, it was somebody jogging who, if you're exercising, you're trying to keep it going. So you don't want to stop. So, and then there's a person being nice, waving him across, letting him go. Think about how that person feels right now.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And then somebody who doesn't realize what's going on with the jogger, and the person who's being courteous is just driving and hits the other, it's what we know. There's no evidence that he was on his cell phone or distracted driver, things like that. It's just a tragic accident. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, if there was evidence of texting or alcohol or something,
right,
then there are ways to opine on that. But because the police just never whatever happened. I mean, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but I'm going to say that the police didn't find that to be the case. They didn't charge him with that, and so that's not something that you can really adjudicate. And so at this point, it just doesn't it doesn't jive with me. Now, if we want to reverse time and go back a couple of years ago and discuss the Jordan Bohannon incident in the bar at DC's, by all means, because there's video of it for one, but two, it's there's that's a situation where I think you can come to either different conclusions or discuss it in a way where opinion kind of is justified. In this situation, I just think it's such an unfortunate situation where there's really no fault, and the scars of this incident are going to be there for the rest of Jack's life, for that other driver's life, for the family of Corey Height, for the McCaffrey family. Because if this was my son or my daughter who did this, I would be devastated myself. And that's kind of what was highlighted in the McCaffrey family letter. And, people were like, oh, this is definitely Fran's last year. Again, however you feel about Fran as a coach or as a person or whatever, that's irrelevant. Think of it this way, that this is just a horrible, tragic accident. And I think that, we need to just kind of leave that one alone.
I think the landscape, Scott, of where we are, not to get too deep here or philosophical, but as a society is, you talked about it. It's Twitter, it's Threads, it's Instagram, Facebook. Everybody wants, immediate information. Everybody wants to talk about things, especially when people are celebrities, high profile people. And as you said, as for lack of a better term, this thing has festered for 2 months with people. We had another situation in town here where 2 people were arrested in a traffic accident that killed somebody, and Jack McCaffrey's name was not released till the end. I kind of see this. I know I've seen, the Freedom of Information folks in the state and other people talking about how, most times the name is released. I understand what the Iowa City Police did here because it is a high profile case, and you are, investigating somebody who is a relative of a celebrity and has some celebrity himself. He's one of the higher ranked basketball prospects in the country for his class. And I think what they were able to do by just focus on the investigation, there wasn't really anything to release anyway, other than his name, and it was out there anyway. I don't know how you feel about that, but I understand it. But I also understand people that feel like, hey, the name should have been out there. But at the end of the day, as we said, it's just a tragedy, just unfortunate tragedy. And then obviously there's the public information component of the story as well.
Yeah. I think reasonable people can disagree on the profile of who was involved. I do think that portion of it, whether he's a minor too. Let's not forget that.
Yes.
He's 16 years old, so I think that's something, because, we see crimes, felonies committed by teenagers underage that their names are not released. So I think we can discuss that one at a higher level as to whether or not these names should be released. But I'm not going to fault the police department from following their due diligence to come up with, whether or not he should be cited, or if there was whatever was involved, because as you mentioned, not only the profile of Jack himself, of the McCaffrey family, very prominently known nationally, not just locally, and then you also look at the ramifications, because how he's cited or charged with something has civil consequences if there is ever a lawsuit filed.
And we should mention that the McCaffrey release did come through a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are different areas that you just have to, and the police are smart. I mean, that's maybe, unfortunate. This is a completely different topic as to who and what gets it, goes through the system and who's fairly treated and unfairly treated. And it's, yes, money has an impact on it. Who has an attorney, how the attorney interacts with the law enforcement has a major factor on that. And, and then you also look at the, the Johnson County Attorney's Office, how they want it, because they're impacted. I mean, they're high profile people. So I just think that the charging part of it, or the citing part of it, absolutely need to be going as diligent as possible to come up with whatever. And I'm not going to criticize them or anything regarding what Jack was cited with. That's up to the police department. That's up to the court of law. But I think you can agree or disagree about whether or not his name should have been announced earlier. But I'm not going to disagree at all with the length of time that it took before they decided to, what violation to cite Jack with.
Yeah, we don't have any really insight into that investigation either. What was used? I mean, witnesses,
Yeah.
Some type of video footage, if there was any.
Right.
And, we just don't know what they use. But, I agree with you. You want them to do a thorough investigation unencumbered, not having to deal with, the public. So just kind of put your head down, do it, gather all the facts that are available to you. Was he speeding? Was he on his phone? They didn't find that stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't find any violation in that regard. And I think the charge reflects that.
Right. And, and here's what the McCaffreys have to decide to do in the future regarding this case is, are they just going to, in a million times, people, most people would just pay the fine. However, when you're dealing with a car accident and insurance and the potential, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the potential for civil litigation, they may want to plead not guilty. They may want a court date. They may want it, because then if they plead, if Jack pleads guilty, then you're held liable for that. And then, then if there's a civil litigation, then so there's a lot of legal nuance involved here. And so, that's why why it took so long. And that's why I expect it to, I mean, I will probably keep checking just to see if it has been paid, if he's paid the fine and moved on, but he also faces, suspension of his license for 6 months because there was a fatality involved.
Yes. And we'll see. This story, obviously there's a potential for civil litigation. So we'll kind of see where this goes from here. But, the information is out there, what people were talking about, in gatherings throughout the summer. And I think that speaks to, the celebrity aspect of this, the public figure aspect of this, how many people wanted to talk about this, even though the name wasn't out there. And that probably justifies how it was handled by the Iowa City Police Department.
Absolutely. I know we both have, whether it's a high school friend of mine on DM on Facebook, and then thinking that he's getting off scot-free. And then the discussion of, well, I heard this and I heard he was on his phone, or I heard he was drinking, or, I'm like, I don't know what you want me to tell you, and it's like, oh, they're just trying to sweep this under the rug. And this is, I'm not going there either. I think that right now it's, finding out all the details because of the tragic, part of this. And so, yeah, everywhere, a lot of places I've gone, as you have too, and, whether it's texts, DMs, whatever. And there are several things that I just will not opine on. And this is one of them that I've just, here are the facts and that's it, and maybe that makes me old school or whatever, but that's really all I'm going to do in this case. I mean, our opinions here are as far as I'm going to go, but I'm not going to say, oh, they should have done this or he should have done it. it's hindsight, because if anybody could take away that half second decision, they all would have universally,
Yep.
and it would have just been a moment that nobody would have even given a thought to in this world, like we do driving down the street every day. But it didn't happen, and it's just a sad situation.
Yep. No doubt. And the correct approach here for others is to not get on social media and elsewhere and be a dick,
Yeah.
but to, if you pray. If if you're more, a vibes person, do that. But just, think about the people that were affected here and hope, that they can heal as best they can. It's going to stay with them forever, but, hopefully there's healing here over time for a really tragic event that, as Scott said, it was a succession of, quick decisions, quick, actions, and ended in tragedy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the hard part. And you think of, he's got 4 children, he's got a wife, he's got his parents are alive, he's got 2 brothers, he's been in the military for what, 27 years or something.
Yeah.
23. Grew up in Marion, he's got friends and family all over the place, and they're all going to be affected by it. Jack McCaffrey's a young man. This is mentally going to take its toll on him. And it's a situation that, and I don't know how much more we get into this, but this is one where I guarantee some people have probably woken up in the middle of the night with nightmares, that moment comes to their mind, and then they're 2:30 in the morning or whatever, and it pops up. Tragedy is just something that it's not going to shake. And it could be somebody in the other side of the road who saw it happen, because I don't know how many times I've seen it, or you've seen, maybe it's somebody walking behind a car in a parking lot, and all of a sudden you see the car backing up, you're like, no, and I'll scream really loud, and just because, a kid or something like that. And I've been hit by a car 2 days after September 11th. And so that laid me up for the weekend, and I didn't have anything to watch. But I don't mean to make light of the situation.
No, I know where you're going. I had my foot run over in New York City once by a cab. It did not feel good. It happened so quick too. But anyway, let's put our energy into thinking about the people that were affected by this, and not getting on social media and screaming foul play and cover up and all that other stuff. So hopefully everybody can begin healing from really a shitty situation.
Yeah.
There's really no way to transition to sports talk after this, but we'll do our best to do that. And we learned, Scott, yesterday. I recorded my mailbag yesterday because I didn't do it on Tuesday because we're at Steve's service. But somebody had asked me who I thought Iowa was going to bring to Indianapolis. It's always that summertime, guessing game on who it's going to be. And I kind of wrote guys down that I was thinking in my mind before I started recording the mailbag. And there were plenty of guys I thought were, worthy, that I think would be good participants in something like that. You just go off the top, 3 guys I think that have meant a lot to this program that aren't going: Nico Ragaini, Torrey Taylor, and Logan Lee. Those 3 to me were like on my list early on. Joe Evans.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of guys there. I think they did a good job here, though. I think Kirk did a good job here. Do you bring McNamara? Do you not bring McNamara? I think Wisconsin's bringing Mordecai. So, it's tough now how much time have we spent on this podcast with NIL and the transfer portal? And now it affects things like this, because people are thinking, all right, do I bring a guy who's been in my program? Do I bring a guy who the media wants to talk to? What do you do here? And I think for Kirk, it's usually been a reward for service.
Yeah, it's always who deserves it and who represents the program in his eyes best. And that's not the same as what we think, because we think, or fans think of it as your three best players. And he thinks of it as three most deserving players, so it's a different vibe altogether. Yeah, Tanner Mordecai's coming, Jeff Sims from Nebraska.
Right, that's the other one I saw too.
Yeah. They're transfer quarterbacks. Hell, there's 6 starting transfer quarterbacks in the West Division this year. I mean, only Minnesota does not have a transfer quarterback starting, which is really wild.
Row the boat, baby.
Oh, and Purdue, same deal. Hudson Card from Texas. So, it's really fascinating to me how this gets decided. And I really did think that Cade McNamara would go. I really did think that. Now, something we're not necessarily privy to, that I don't even know if anybody would tell us, would be, did he ask him and he say no? That very well could have happened too.
Because he would have been facing Michigan reporters.
Yeah, right. And maybe he didn't want to. Maybe he said no. And this is just throwing it out there, but Cade seems like the type of guy that I'll go if you want me to go. But I also think these guys have deserved it because they've been here. He just kind of has that persona. And when you look at Cooper DeJean, makes perfect sense. He's the best player on the team. He's one of the best players in the country. Yeah, bring that guy. Luke Lachey surprised me. I'll be honest. I mean, I think he's got the potential to be that guy, and maybe they know that too. And maybe they think, they thought differently lately about some of these topics. And maybe this is a way for them to say, you know what, we think this guy's really freaking good, and nobody's really given, and he's getting a little bit of run, but not enough. And
tight end is that's our premium position. That's the one that everybody thinks about Iowa. I mean, it used to be offensive line, and it still is to a degree, but it's tight end U.
Yeah, it's tight end U. Look at the NFL. I mean,
yeah,
you're going to have 4 starting tight ends in the NFL this year.
And here's our next guy.
Yeah, and here's our next guy. Plus, you got the Ohio State angle. His dad's a sideline reporter, All-American there. So there's some good stories there with Luke Lachey, and I'm sure the Ohio State, it's from Columbus area, so I'm sure that'll be good there. And then Noah Shannon, tip of the cap. This is between him or Logan Lee. I think you couldn't make a wrong decision, and I think with Noah that I guess, in speculating, I don't think he must be in too bad of trouble for a situation. So because
I was wondering how you're going to go down that road. But yes, I was thinking the same thing.
Right. I saw.
And if people don't know what we're talking about, tough.
Yeah. So I don't know that they would go if he had some issues.
Yes.
But
I was thinking Jay Higgins maybe too, because of being an Indiana kid. But I think Noah Shannon got a year on him, been in this program, and he's kind of that, he's a great example of a guy who came in and worked his way up into playing time and then became a team leader and a really productive player.
Sure. He's back for a 6th year, and he's, one thing we talked about a few years ago, and I think this probably still resonates, is you want to be as diverse as you can be. And that doesn't mean you shortchange somebody. It just means that there are lots of opportunities, and provide some opportunities for players who deserve it. And whether it's Logan Lee or whether it's Noah Shannon, I think you could flip a coin either way and be just as happy. And if it's, Torrey Taylor would have been a lot of fun. But, and sometimes these players don't want
to bring your tight end and your punter. What's more Iowa than that?
Yeah, maybe he wants to avoid those jokes. Yeah, maybe they want to avoid those jokes. I don't know. But, and he does ask his coaches too. Who do you think? And maybe Kelvin was like, Noah deserves this. Noah's been around.
Or he could. I mean, they could have talked to both. I mean, Logan and Noah are really close. They could have been like, we'd like to take one of you guys. Do you guys have a feeling on it? And, and I'll mention, because I had it written down, Logan Lee, Good Works team. He's got a lot of stuff going on in his life. He's married.
Yeah.
Maybe his wife didn't want him to go.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Kidding. So. I'm kidding.
Well, I'll say this: that your wife's probably sitting by you. That's probably
yes. I'm very careful right now.
But I think, she could have played a factor. But I think probably in the factor of, if that's a factor, let's say that hey, it gives me one more day at home before camp starts.
Yep.
And Noah may have a significant other. I don't know, but if he does, then there at least he doesn't have a ring, so he doesn't have to worry about that. And again, we don't know all the nuance, and it's always funny because I get this question, when you're on the radio and you get these questions on podcast, who Iowa's going to take, and it's funny. I always kind of turn around and said, well, who do you think they're going to take in basketball? Nobody cares,
Yeah.
So
they seem like they bring more in basketball than football, and it's a much smaller roster. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, there's like 4 guys who Fran has taken in the past, and there's a fraction of the media there, and but again, coaches look at it differently as a reward, as in some ways, and basketball is different than football. So, but there's a pretty good array of players. I'm kind of pleased with who is all showing up, except for I think Michigan could have done a better job, but that Michigan always could do a better job. JJ McCarthy should probably be there, but you never know with Harbaugh. And,
yeah, he's a weirdo.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been great to talk to JJ McCarthy about Kate McNamara.
Yep.
But I guess we will have to settle for the Big Ten championship game in December.
Yeah, we'll see if we're headed there.
Yeah.
Take a break. Yeah, let's take a break. Why not? Let's get my read up here. I should know this thing by heart. Actually, I recited it the other day without the script in front of me, but I worry sometimes I'm going to leave something out. So I will let you all know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. SUI.org, Systems Unlimited, doing great work in East Central Iowa for over 50 years, and we certainly appreciate their work and their support of our podcast. We're going to hear from a few others who support the podcast through sponsorship. If you'd like to do so, reach out. Scott and I will take on anybody who wants to support us. We'll welcome you with open arms. So take a break here, hear from a few folks, and we'll be back on the other side. Hey, we made it back here on the Hotspot podcast. Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. As always, most weeks we are here 9 a.m.-ish Central Time on Thursdays. So check us out. Check back weekly. We stream it on YouTube for your viewing pleasure. I don't know how pleasurable that is looking at the two of us, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Scott, for some reason, I don't know why, sat through the entire ESPY Awards last night and saw Caitlin Clark named the collegiate, whatever it is, women's basically the same award she won out in California the week before, but just in the ESPY realm this time. And I heard a lot of complaints about this broadcast, Scott.
It was the worst broadcast I've ever seen in my life of anything of note. And I wish I would have saw her win that award, but we didn't see her win that award. We didn't see anybody.
They didn't even show that?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was released after the fact, after 3 freaking hours of ESPN gets a bad rap in certain areas. This was probably that times 100. They used to have like in memoriam, Rob. There was no in memoriam. I'm like, you want to see all the athletes and the sports figures who passed in the last year. Oh no, there wasn't anything like that. What about the retirements? Oh, they had a big little ceremony for Carmelo Anthony.
Jumbo shrimp.
Yeah, exactly. Jumbo shrimp. Yeah. It was a big deal for a short period of time, ceremony for Carmelo Anthony retiring. But the GOAT, Tom Brady, retired, and there was nothing on him. Not one word. Um, Pat McAfee was the host, but he was only up there for his monologue, and that was about it. The every other, I mean, almost every award, Rob, was um, courage, and I mean, I think it devalues it. When you constantly have this sob story of we changed the world in this way, we did this Arthur Ashe Courage Award. I mean, they're all great stories, but as you know, Rob, you can't write a tearjerker every single day. People
Right.
it runs together, and when you only have, I think, 6 or 7 of your athletes, they had the breakthrough athlete, and Angel Reese made sure to go like this up there.
I
And
did see that.
yeah,
I saw that on Twitter.
yeah, and so,
It's time for that to be done.
well, it's like, now they're trying to make it look like it's hers. And it's like, you're late to the party here.
Yeah.
And so she won breakout athlete, but they didn't show baseball at all. Nothing on baseball. Everything was NBA focused. A little bit on football because the Chiefs won Team of the Year and Mahomes won.
So does
They
ESPN and Disney have the rights to the NBA?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one.
Well, they do for the NFL too, and they do for MLB. They should. But I'm like looking at the list. It's like they didn't announce NFL Player of the Year. They didn't announce Major League Baseball, NHL, college football, or college sports, men's or women's.
So this doesn't sound like it was a exercise to hand out awards. It was an exercise to
congratulate ourselves for all the good things that we've done as a society, and then we sat there for 3 hours, and it wasn't me. I would have rather have watched the first part of the Mayans and not the second, the DVR version.
I haven't watched any of it yet. And I was watching, I'll tell you how much I care about the ESPYs. I was watching NBA Summer League last night.
I would have rather have watched that. The only reason why, and I know I mentioned this before, is my wife is a massive Iowa women's basketball fan.
And that's how disappointing is that to watch that show and not be able to see the person you're wanting to see who won the award.
I know, that's the problem. It's like, and then we get some stupid ass fucking joke about Iowa corn when it gets brought up.
What was that about? I saw it on Twitter, but I did not get the context.
It was something to the effect of, well, Iowa does more than just grow corn. Because Brock Purdy and Caitlin Clark, and I know I'm
lazy.
It's like,
that's lazy.
That stereotype, just, hey, let's go like Caitlin Clark. What the fuck, it's just, and in reality, I mean, is she a breakout performer? Well, she was basically the, national player of the year before her, and she was split there.
Aaliyah Boston, right?
Aaliyah Boston got it, yeah. but she got some votes and stuff. So maybe that wasn't the award for her. But I think if she's in the category, then she deserves it. Or, Brock Purdy, terrific story there. Whether you think,
is that the one that Angel Reese won?
Yeah.
What was that breakthrough?
Breakthrough. Yeah.
Performance.
Yeah.
How does that?
Breakthrough performer?
Performer.
Yeah.
So I guess that's somebody who you're not expecting something out of that breaks through.
Maybe somebody who wasn't much of a name before, but became a big name. And I guess, so what was Angel Reese known for? I mean, she was a good basketball player. I thought Aaliyah Boston's a better basketball player than she was. So she basically followed around Caitlin Clark and pointed at her ring and went like this at the end of a game, which I don't have a problem with the actions. I do at the time of the game. I'm like, yeah, maybe during the game you do that, maybe afterwards. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I was really, really disappointed. I thought it was a complete waste of time. And I'm thinking, ESPN, make this a celebration of sports. There are so many fun and interesting stories. I mean, Ohtani, from the Angels, we've never seen anybody like this. Not in the last 100 years have we seen anybody be able to do what he's doing. What a great opportunity for them to promote one of the sports that they cover. Connor McDavid, in hockey. It was pretty much all NBA and Angel Reese, and that was it. And I thought, man, you lost a big freaking opportunity. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy and he's coming back. Not one word. Just a terrible, terrible job. I mean, yes, Liam Hendricks is a great story for fighting cancer. No question. The women's soccer team fighting for equality. Great story. No question. Among the others, Drew Holiday and his wife, Lauren, and the fights that they're doing. But after a while, the fights run together. And it's like, you're bogging me down with this. This is why people don't want to read these stories every single day. And you shouldn't cram them into a 3-hour show. And then, oh, by the way, here's the play of the year. And it's Justin Jefferson with 5 minutes to go. And it's, oh, here's team of the year. And it's the Kansas City Chiefs. So anyway, there's my rant.
It sounds like it was like a, 30 for 30, a collection of 30 for 30 documentary short docs.
Yeah.
And on what should have been an award show.
Right. I mean, what do you want to be? And, probably midway through it, I tweeted out, I'm like, they should have 2 of these. One's for, sports performance and one for, achievement, or off the floor or whatever, because, I think this is an opportunity, if you're ESPN, to showcase your sports that you pay a hell of a lot of money to do, and it's on ABC. And there's nothing else going on.
Oh, that thing was on ABC last night? I guess I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. So, and again, I was just like, what the hell? And then 9 o'clock came and I'm like, I really want to turn to the Mayans, but my wife really wants to watch Caitlin Clark. And I'm like, well, I'll DVR it anyway and blow through the commercials. And, I was kind of glad I did it that way. It was a heck of
those FX commercials can drag, man. Yeah. That's why I like being able to fast forward through those.
Yeah, and then especially the Burger King ones, because they're on every freaking network and they're on every commercial break, and I'm like, how much money do they have? And I have to mute them because I mute them within a second, and I always say the word no, because I just don't, they filter your brain and they don't get out there. I'm like, so anyway.
Well, it sounds like I didn't miss anything, so I'm glad. I will probably won't watch next year either.
No.
What else do I have on my list? Lisa Bluter.
Yes.
Speaking of women's basketball contract extension, after we spoke last week, it's been a few days since that news came out. I believe she goes through is it the 28-29 season?
Yeah.
Is that the contract extended through? Yep. So well-deserved. And she seems, she's older than me. She's in a hell of a lot better shape than me. And I think she's got the program cooking right now. Why leave?
Yeah.
Why retire?
She has no reason to. And, and her salary was bumped up to $1 million. And then with, the guarantees that aren't part of the salary, it equals about 650,000. And then she has some, incentives, which she collected on almost all of them last year.
Yeah.
So, and rightly so. And I know when I wrote about it the other day that it locks up the most popular coach on Iowa's campus, and she is. I don't think that's to be questioned. When you can go a week and a half after the national title game and have a celebration, and all of a sudden it's 10,000 plus people are showing up for it, that says a lot on a Friday, afternoon, because it's one of those things where the celebrations, if you do it like within a couple of days, then a lot of people still have it on their mind. But if you do it a week and a half later, then people are like, I don't know if I want to go to Iowa City and brave the traffic and all that. No, it was slam packed. And and obviously the interest in season ticket sales, the prices have jumped. So yeah, really good move for Iowa to lock her up. She's beloved. They got a great program.
And it's appropriate for Gary to extend the contract before he steps out August 1st.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you don't want to leave that one, hey?
No, that one seemed like a no-brainer, as they say.
Yeah, but I got a chance to talk to Gary yesterday for a little while, and they had a celebration for him, a going away party, and it was well attended by every coach and administrators. And I didn't write anything, wasn't going to anyway, just to kind of find out a little bit more about Gary and what his next moves are. He's going to live in Iowa City. He said he's going to tailgate now. He says, I've never tailgated before, and I'm going to do that now. So
I've never tailgated before either.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a game in Kinnick from the stands.
I did, but it was a long time ago. I mean, it was long. It was like, yeah, it was the 90s when I was in college. I came up and partied with my friends. And in fact, one time I had tickets. I didn't make it because we were up too late. We were up till like 8 or 9 in the morning. And
that
I'm like,
shit probably happens quite a lot.
Yeah. It was like, I got tickets, but we partied till like 7, 8, 9 in the morning. And I'm like, not going to the game. But now, he's going to stick around, and, he hopes to work with college sports, in some capacity. And I think they're going to he said he and his wife, and I don't know if the family's going to go to like the Blue Ridge Mountains, I think it was, for a week or two in August. And, so I think he's kind of excited to get to the next phase of his life. And it was a nice celebration for him. I mean, like I said, I think every coach was there except for, I didn't see Fran, and it's completely understandable, but his assistants were there. Even guys like Kirk Sparrow, there were retired administrators there, Mark Jennings, Mark Abbott, and some others. And, so yeah,
I think for the most part, Gary was pretty well liked by the employees over there. They're obviously, when you're in that position, you're going to have some conflicts, so to speak, with certain members of your staff. But, for the most part, I think he was pretty well liked over there by most of the coaches in all of the sports.
Yeah, I think that's, there'll be mutually exclusive tag can be applied to some extent, that some people may think he didn't do a good job or a good enough job, and other people may think he did. But I think by and large, the people he interacted with on a personal level was always pretty good. I think, he got along really well with people that way. And so, most every coach that I saw, Rick Heller was there. And I guess today was, you want to talk about a big deal. 10 years ago today was when Rick Heller was hired. And I think you could probably chalk that up as his best hire as a head coach.
Yeah, definitely make an argument for that.
Because remember what baseball was like before. And at that point, if they would have eliminated baseball, yes, it would have pissed everybody off. But it was almost like, Iowa State doesn't have it. Wisconsin doesn't have it. Iowa's not any good at it, and Rick Heller has turned Iowa baseball into a very competitive program, and one that has a lot going for it. So it was good to see Rick there. And
probably be him or Woody, right? Those would be the two, Joey Woody or both of those guys have done a really good job with programs that they took over that, weren't in a good place.
Yeah. And the third one I'd probably mention to be Lisa Salucci.
Yeah.
Because of the circumstances in which she replaced, her best friend, and turned out to be, maybe the biggest situation involving Gary Barta over his career. And, but, Lisa Salucci, was able to stabilize it. I thought that was going to be a wasteland of a program for a while, and but she did a nice job there and put everything in the right path. And then we saw, they ranked as high as number 1, and I think they've got a really competitive future there.
I was talking about the NBA Summer League, and we saw Keegan Murray kind of dip in and out of that and did a great job. And Chris has looked good, Scott. Chris is playing well for Portland, and excuse me, good to see him. Tyler Cook's running in the Summer League, and Joe Wieskamp as well. So good to see those guys getting some run, and hopefully those guys, Chris will stick. Chris obviously will stick. We're nice to see Joe and Tyler be able to stick at least with a 2-way or something like that as well. So I think Chris's best basketball is ahead of him, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, will he be what his brother is? I don't know. And
that's a high bar too. Yeah. And I hope people don't hold him to that standard.
That's really unfair, because and he was held to it here, and I think he came really close. I mean, there's nuance, and you can kind of discuss certain things, but I think, his brother is a potential all-star. And can he get there? I don't know, but I think he could be a very, very good player, potentially a starter in the NBA. And I think he's played pretty well. He's hit some threes, he's missed some threes, but he's gotten out there. I haven't watched Tyler Cook or Wieskamp yet. I'm glad to see Cook is with Milwaukee. I think that's the team.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'd like to see him be able to stick in the league because I think he's had that kind of talent. And, I remember in the old days of the PTL and, his first impression was like, wow, this guy looks different. And it would be nice to see him be able to stick with the team and, in Wieskamp as well. So have you seen either one of them? How have they
just clips I've seen like on social media or NBA.com. I kind of try to see if I can find anything, but those guys I haven't caught their games. I I landed on the Knicks last night, which was unfortunate, but they did they went to overtime in the NBA All-Star or the NBA Summer League for some reason, and the Knicks pulled it out in overtime.
Did they really
with some guy I don't know hitting the winning shot?
When it comes to preseason or stuff like this, they don't need overtime.
No. It's like instant replay in the baseball All-Star game. You don't need that, man.
You have freaking 6 umpires out there, right? It's like,
and it's the All-Star game.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and then it gets overturned at second base. It's like, why do you need them at all? Why don't you just have the guy in the sky view every play? But no, when it comes to preseason ball in any sport, shut it down after the 4 quarters in football or NBA, 3 periods in hockey, and 9 innings in baseball. Because in the NFL, rightly so, most coaches will go for 2 at the end. We don't need to be playing into overtime. There's no reason for that. But
the only good thing about the baseball, and I'm not talking about replay, but the good setup they have, which I hope we get to see sometime, is a tie game after 9 and they go to a home run derby.
Yeah. I heard that. I'm like, no, exactly how's that work?
Because they had asked, who did they ask? Maybe it was Julio Rodriguez for the Mariners. They had asked him if he had been picked for the home run derby, if they went to extra innings, and he said no. And I'm like, dude was in the home run derby. How do you not pick him? But it would have been interesting to see. It's kind of like that shootout. Who do they pick in soccer to be involved in the shootout? Maybe there's some strategy there.
That would be, can you imagine Ohtani hitting the home run to win it for the American League when I did watch the All-Star game. I mean, those are 2 things that I never really watched, but I watched the All-Star game and I watched the ESPYs back to back. I don't know what's wrong with me.
The Major League Baseball All-Star game is the only All-Star game even remotely worth watching because it actually looks like baseball. Yeah. Whereas the other sport like basketball, they don't play defense, so it's not really basketball. Football is whatever. Is it a skills competition now? Do they even play a game anymore?
I think they play flag football now.
Okay.
It's still, even though MLB got it's still like the lowest ratings of all time at like 7 million viewers, but it's still decent for the summer. But when you're looking at, I think the NFL, even with the skills flag football game, it was still like 6 million.
People love the league. There's no doubt about that. And baseball is waning, especially with the younger generations, but it doesn't seem like it gives a shit.
What would be smart for them to do?
The pitch clock does help.
Yeah, it does. Every now and then, like I know that they're talking about Philadelphia next year, I think has got it. And in 25, it might be Atlanta or Chicago or a couple other places. What about Field of Dreams for the All-Star game?
Yeah.
That might be something that they could shake it up a little bit because, like this year they're skipping it. And I think they're skipping it next year too, because they're going to Birmingham. I love that idea, frankly. I think that's great. Birthplace of Willie, not birthplace, but it might be Willie Mays, where he got his start, with the Birmingham team there. I think that would be that's great. I'm glad that they're doing stuff like that. But can you imagine an all-star game at Field of Dreams? That would be all right. I think that could energize the game, so, because it's certainly, I covered both of those games up there, and it was, the first one was the greatest event I've ever covered. And I don't say that lightly, but it was a moment where the game matched the surroundings and everything, the pageantry, of wow, this is really cool, to holy shit, look at this ending. I don't need to see another game again because I just watched the best one I've seen. But if they had that in the All-Star game, that would be the best.
Yeah, hopefully with the renovations and development up there, which I have mixed emotions about.
Yeah.
If they're going to do it, if they're doing it anyway, lean into it and make the most of it and take advantage of the facility and put state baseball there.
Yeah.
Really lean into it.
Yeah, it'd be perfect because the time of year, this is when you have
and there's an opening too, because this is the last year of the 3-year contract at Banks for the big schools. And then Banks goes into renovation mode.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking for a new location. Next year, they should do it up there.
Absolutely. And Carroll, I mean, I remember, we both remember back in the old days where it was Marshalltown and Carroll. And it was,
I never went to Carroll. I always went to Marshalltown.
Yeah, same with me. The first time I went to Carroll was for an iClub this spring, but that's just, and I understand that, that the iCubs, it makes it difficult and everything like that. And
I think from what I had heard, the iCubs and the Colonel Stadium is a Memorial Stadium where they play.
Yeah.
I guess a rule change, minor league baseball, major league baseball, they can't guarantee 5 days in a row for the tournament. So that's why it's not at the iCubs or Colonel Stadium.
Yeah. And Dwayne Banks is a good place. Mm-hmm. And there are other places that probably could host it. You'd think someplace like Waterloo wouldn't be bad. But, Field of Dreams, you've got the signature place in the state, and how many kids would love to grow up and go to that? I mean, I think it's perfect. And I threw out the idea of fall ball classic last week in my, kind of conversation with people, because, you don't want to do it in the spring, like college baseball in the spring. There's no more miserable place on earth than playing baseball right next to a cornfield that's just been planted, or even before it's been planted. It's miserable. It's hell on earth because the wind, if it's 45 and it's sunny, it's like a mirage, because then the wind comes and it's like, God, it's like 15.
Yeah.
So if you were to do it last weekend in September, and the corn is golden brown, and you have a harvest classic at Field of Dreams, you can get IH Red Zone sponsoring it, right?
Yes.
and Gary Dolphin.
Contact us for any ideas. Scott and I have a lot of ideas. So
yeah, right.
And we're more than willing to share them with you. And if you want to compensate us, we'll take that too. So speaking of baseball, here we go. Another transition here. The Major League Baseball draft was this week, Scott, and 4 Hawkeyes have hooked up with Major League Baseball teams. Bring this up here so I don't get people's names wrong and what have you. But Jared Simpson, I keep calling him Jacob. Jared Simpson was the first to hear his name called, first Hawkeye to hear his name called. And he went in the 8th round to the Washington Nationals. He is a Clinton, Iowa native, relief pitcher for the Hawkeyes, and he went in the 8th round to Washington. And then we had Ty Langenberg, a Urbandale product, went in the 11th round, and he went to the Minnesota Twins, so staying in the Midwest. And he became the 29th player drafted under Rick Heller. And he was the final guy selected in this year's prospect. And then we had 2 young men who signed free agent deals, Will Christopherson, and probably the biggest name that we heard of, and obviously had his name talked about a lot for an off the field gambling investigation this spring and summer. Keaton Anthony signs a undrafted free agent deal with the Phillies. Scott, I had seen like preseason, he was top 300, which would put him roughly in the middle rounds of the draft, 10-ish, kind of where Langenberg went.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would have to talk to major league, player personnel people to see if this impacted his draft at all. But as we know in most sports, NFL, NBA, these teams invest a lot of money and they do some serious background checks.
Yeah, sure. Well, the situation couldn't have helped him.
No.
That's for sure. And I know he went to the Cape Cod League and was cut, a couple of weeks ago. So that's kind of why, I think, and plus the rounds have been cut significantly, especially since, the teams, number of teams, but 120 of them have been trimmed in the last few years, including my hometown Burlington Bees, were chopped away. So, I'm sure that's probably led to it, but, he's got an opportunity and a really unfortunate ending to his career. It showed a lot of promise, had a great career up until the time that he was withheld from competition. So hopefully he can, get back. But, losing those three pitchers, that's, they were all, really good players for Iowa. They did a really nice job. But, at this point, if Iowa holds true, and they only lost the guy to Maryland, the second
Sam Honar.
Yeah, Honar. And then these players, Iowa might be the favorite next year to win the Big Ten.
Yep, and you got the top of your rotation back with Marcus Morgan and Brody Brecht. So that's always a good place to start in college baseball, right? The guy for LSU is a damn freak.
Yeah,
that guy. Hopefully his arm stays healthy because he's fun.
Yeah, he's a guy that can, maybe be in MLB next year.
Skeens, is that his name? Paul.
Yeah.
Paul Skeens.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a transfer, wasn't he? A transfer portal edition, I think. He was.
You might know that. That's beyond me on my.
I think he was. I could be wrong.
I'm trying to keep up with the.
But to your point earlier, Rick Heller has done a great job with the baseball program and continues to produce major league or professional talent. And good luck to these guys as they get their careers started at the next level. Speaking about futures and careers, I'll do the best I can to transfer on the to do a transition on this one. But we had talked about a pickup that Iowa had last week before we started recording, and that was Rashad Godfrey Jr. He committed last week, and then after we had recorded the podcast last week, Jalen Watson has since committed, and he committed on July 8th, so 5 days ago. And he is a defensive back from Toledo, Ohio, originally from Detroit. And he is the nephew of former Iowa running back, two-time 1,000-yard rusher in a season, Fred Russell. That hasn't happened a lot at Iowa. So certainly one of the more memorable names during that really impressive run from 2002 to 2004. I'll throw 2001 in there too, because that's kind of when it got started. But we've talked about it before on this podcast, Scott. Connections. I was very big on connections and networking when it comes to recruiting. And this one, both of these guys, Godfrey from the Florida area where Phil Parker recruits, and then Watson from the Ohio, Detroit areas that Phil Parker recruits, defensive backs. You got to feel good about both of these guys. And Watson is the guy that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, for sure. And now they've had a really productive official weekend. I went through I wrote a kind of a recap of that the other day, and you look at just the 2001, 2 years ago. I think we even talked about it then as to how difficult the situation was for Iowa not to be able to get these guys on campus. And then they had almost a blind official weekend right after the moratorium was lifted. I think there were 12 uncommitted players and only one, Jacob Bostic was the only one who committed. And then they were like, oh my God, what are they going to do? People were freaking out, and we're trying to calm the nerves. And then it turned out to be a pretty good class. Well, this time around, it was the other way around. You had 9 uncommitted to go along with what I think there were 10 and not,
Yeah, because they're at 19 now, I think.
Yeah. And Bert was,
he was just before the visit weekend.
Yeah. So maybe it was 11 committed, and then there were 7 out of 9 have committed. And then Bert, who was visited earlier, and then there's 2 more left. And I think they're in pretty good shape on the defensive end from Texas.
Chikwe.
Yeah. Chikwe. Is that?
I think that's how it's pronounced.
Okay. So, and the other one is Xavier Lucas, and what happens there, I don't know. So, to be able to close, like closers, like the Gary Ross, but
at 19 right now, though. And, so, you have some wiggle room with the rest of these. Obviously, you talked about Lucas and Chikwe. So if they get in there, then, that gets you to 21, or at least, if you get one, you're at 20. And then we'll see. We talked about the fluidity of all this now with the transfer portal and NIL and all that other stuff. So, good shape. You go into the season with a great position in the current recruiting class, and then you continue. It's that never ending clock now where you're working on 25 and 26 and. It never ends.
It never ends for these guys. And, I think what the optimum number, or where they're probably headed, is maybe 22.
Yeah. But again, they get into camp, they reevaluate the roster. Okay, we need this, we need to add this. Yeah. There's injuries during the season, people leave. So it's because people ask me that, Scott, they're like, well, what's the number going to be? And I'm like, it's usually low 20s, but it's harder to predict that these days with so many moving parts.
And there are more, and there are more moving parts. There are more entry points, because it used to be just basically one, and it was when it was in February,
right?
It was one. You just kind of gathered everybody, you signed them then, and then that was your way of collecting, talent. But now you've got the transfer portal, and you have a second signing day if you need to use it. And then there are other transfer portal opportunities next spring. So this is, it's more of a ballpark or an estimate. And, I think the way it shapes up today is that if they could get, one more defensive lineman, one more defensive back, and probably one more receiver, then that's probably where they'll go. And, but you never know who's going to transfer at the end, or who gets hurt, who's a medical, who's leaving early for the NFL, who retires earlier. And then, as you get into December, you're looking at your roster going, I don't know. We're pretty light here. Luke Lachey's looks like he's going to be a first rounder. Eric All's going to leave. Maybe we need to go out and get a veteran tight end, or maybe Mason Richmond, or had a great year and maybe he wants to go, and you just don't know. And those are the factors that now.
They had an idea that Van Ness was a possibility this time last year, but I don't know as they were looking to replace him.
Mm-hmm. This is not a program that likes to lose 3-year sophomores.
Yeah. And they got a good chance to lose one next spring again.
Well, at least he's a junior. At least they got 3 years on the field with it.
Yeah, that's true.
But, like TJ Hawkinson, they redshirted him hoping to get, to stagger it, because they probably, everybody could see that Noah Fant was probably a 3-year guy. And then, Hawkinson just came on so strong, and they still were hoping to, cross our fingers, you get him one more year. That petered out. And then Lucas Van Ness, kind of the same deal. He was almost exactly like Hawkinson in that he just became so good that, you'd like to have him, but they knew that was going to happen at the end. So, you've got players that are going to be in that ballpark. I think Cooper DeJean is one for sure. So it's obvious, but one of the offensive linemen, Would I predict it? No, but
Mhm.
things happen, and so you got to be prepared for when things happen.
Yes, very fluid in recruiting and roster management these days, and not to make light of the serious nature of what happened at Northwestern with the various um, charges from former players and the dismissal of Pat Fitzgerald. But that's another situation now where I believe the kids there have a 30-day window to get into the transfer portal. And I think Wisconsin sniped one of their recruits in the 2023 class, is it? Or 24? I don't remember which, so I don't want to be wrong, but that process has already started. And there are guys that were on the Northwestern roster and recruits that obviously Iowa was involved with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at a couple of the offensive linemen for sure. Nick Herzog comes to mind immediately, and some others. And you have to do what's best for your program. You can be nice to an extent, but if Pat Fitzgerald was there, then Kirk might play nice, but there's no reason to play nice now. And, first of all, what a horrific situation. Something I didn't expect. I think there's a lot of people, you could say the same thing. And I know early on, and there were so many reports that kind of debated, and it wasn't unlike what we witnessed a couple of years ago here. And I said, I can't tell if this is Sandusky at Penn State, Iowa in 2020, or Duke lacrosse, and that's the worrisome thing about going all in knee-jerk reaction to any of these situations. But obviously there were enough corroborating testimony that forced Pat Fitzgerald out. And but when you look at the players, they're in a really rough spot. The ones that are there, they're there because of Pat Fitzgerald, and some of them were probably abusers. Some of them weren't. Some of them looked the other way. Some of them didn't know. But anyway, there's just a lot of players there now that are hanging in limbo. What do they want to do? And then there's a lot of commits. And I wrote that this could hurt them football wise for a generation, because Fitz was the one that kept them competitive, kept them, because they had a couple of 47 ranked classes and that was it. But when you look at, he was 9-8 against Iowa, 11-6 against Illinois, won 5 times against Wisconsin and Michigan State, had a winning record against Purdue, 6-6 against Nebraska, with a school that to me is at a detriment in so many different ways. But, if the next coach comes in, the loyalty isn't necessarily to Northwestern. The loyalty will be, let's get a winning record and then get the hell out of here. And so I think that they're going to be in a really tough situation, which benefits Iowa, frankly, because some of the players that Northwestern got that were upper echelon level. And I could think of 2 game changers for Iowa that Northwestern got that maybe Iowa could have gotten away from them. Justin Jackson at running back and Peter Skoronsky at offensive line. They were hardcore Chicago suburban guys who went to Northwestern. If Iowa could have got him, Justin Jackson at running back, that would have been nice. And of course, Peter Skoronsky would have been, they might have completed 3 or 4 more passes last year with him.
Yeah, he was a good one, and he'll be a well-paid one now. Yeah, we'll see how things shake out at Northwestern. And as I was saying, I think to Scott before we started recording, or maybe it was when we were recording, I feel for the Northwestern kids that have to go to Indianapolis later this month for the media gathering and having to answer questions about that, because it sounds like the players played a role in this, abuse. And so that's tough. That's putting them in a very, very tough position. We'll see if it ends up happening. if they end up having to, go through that, because you're going to get national people that are going to come at them.
I obviously advocate for openness, but that, to me, Northwestern failed because of its lack of transparency. And I think that this is the one time where being a private institution hurt them throughout this whole process, that they've never had to face FOIAs like Iowa, like Michigan, like other institutions do on a frequent, if not daily basis, to go through these processes. So they stupidly waited till the entire thing came out and then put through an executive summary. And, oh, by the way, our coach is suspended for 2 weeks, but it's the 2 weeks everybody takes off anyway. And voila, that was supposed to end it. I look back at this thinking there were multiple junctures. Can you imagine, like, let's say right around spring practice, if Pat Fitzgerald says, hey, I want to address something here, right? We're still in the middle of an investigation regarding hazing in our program. I've been informed that there has been hazing and we will not tolerate it. And we think that it needs to be eliminated. And he could have, if he would have done that, nothing, this would have gone. I mean, maybe still gets in trouble, but by taking it all the way to the end, and for those who maybe think that something stronger should have happened at Iowa, I think if there's one difference here and why Kirk Ferentz is still the coach and why Pat Fitzgerald isn't, is Kirk's humility enabled him to at least to try to change, to do the right thing, to accept responsibility in so many different ways. Whereas Pat Fitzgerald chose not to go that path. And even on Friday, even when this was announced, had he said something, that might have changed the ultimate situation. And so, for these players, I wouldn't fault them at all if they didn't show up. I wouldn't want them to show up, because what are they going to say? How is this going to help promote their team and talk about football? They're not going to talk about football.
But the AD and the school president, on the podium, have them answer the questions.
Well, exactly. Derek Gregg and Michael Schill, have them sit there.
Yep.
Have them answer questions. You're going to put an interim coach up on the podium and then put him on the side for an hour to talk about this? That's unwinnable. That's really difficult.
Yep.
I think you're right. Put Derek Gregg up there. Put Michael Schill up there. Have them talk. Have them describe the situation and the process. Don't make Bryce Gallagher go through this. Rod Hurd, Bryce Kurtz. Those are the players that are supposed to come and talk about it. I just don't. You're putting them in a very, very difficult. They're young men, and there's you could look at it a couple of different ways. They could have been part of the problem. They might not have known about the problem. However, you're trying to put them in a situation where they are going to really have issues going, trying to describe what they want to describe with this. And then after that, what kind of football are you going to ask them about? They're not going to be able to answer those questions.
No. Well, we'll see what happens here in a couple of weeks when we get down to Indy. Let's wrap up with the athletic series that you're involved with conference expansion in college athletics. I know it's overarching, but there's certainly plenty of Big Ten discussion and Iowa connections to that.
Yeah, I had a very, very long interview over the phone with Jim Delaney, and lasted 2.5 to 3 hours in length and totality. Talked to him for about half that time, and then hung up. And then he wanted to talk more. In fact, and he told me he went to the dentist, and he was trying to think about anything but getting dental work done. So then he started taking notes, and then he had a bunch of things he wanted to say. And then funny thing was, I was like at a coffee shop when he called. So I went outside. It was on one of those brutally hot days. So I I went into my car to take the notes and record, and then my phone overheated, so then I had to go back in and do it that way. It's just a mess that way. But even so, very, very fascinating discussions. The only topic that he really wouldn't address that I asked him for were schools that they considered in 2010 when they ended up going with Nebraska, and he chose not to discuss those out of non-disclosure statements. But we went through the Penn State debacle in 1990, and that's going to be its own story at some point. We went through all the moving pieces after Penn State, from the Southwest Conference and Big 8 merger to the SEC and the teams they took, to this dalliance with Notre Dame that ultimately didn't work. That's what a story that went up today. Tomorrow it'll be how BTN influenced expansion, the Maryland, Nebraska, and Rutgers attractions, and then what maybe the future may hold. So it's really an in-depth look that I took part of. And then I've got 2 more stories coming out on different teams in the Big Ten, Penn State being one of them. And then another story, this is completely different, is I was initially going to do rivalries that were killed because of realignment. But when you think about it, Rob, there were great rivalries that were started and continued because of realignment. And some of these were like Penn State, Ohio State. That was a really great series. And then there were ones like Tennessee, Florida, which they never really played each other in the SEC. And then all of a sudden they're in the same division, and they gave us Peyton Manning versus Steve Spurrier, and saying things like you can't spell citrus without UT. I'd love that. But specific to Iowa and Iowa State to an extent, I did include in some of these categories series that involved Iowa, and like one thrived. I put Iowa, Nebraska in there, and I know that may sound strange, especially against laying next to some of the others. Tennessee, Florida, Ohio State, Penn State, Arkansas, LSU, and Clemson's Florida State. But, Iowa, Nebraska, I just kind of wrote that they didn't know how much they disliked each other until they started facing off on Black Friday. And now it's a protected rivalry in the Big Ten. So I think we can agree that there are fan bases that interact on Twitter more so than others, even if depending on their rivalry. And Iowa and Nebraska tend to interact. Maybe Iowa State is close, but I think that when things start heating up, Iowa and I seem to be in the middle of it a lot of times. That's one that's in there. And so I mentioned them. And then I spotlighted under the survived category, Iowa, Wisconsin. And because we've seen it multiple times, legends and leaders. Yeah. There you go. There's your laugh. It died, for a 2-year cycle. And then when Penn State joined the league, it died for a 2-year cycle. And then they really wanted to keep this one alive. And here we are. It thrived. And now it's still, it's a made man, it's like mafia term. It's a made series, it's permanently attached. And I did have a couple that added, in the Iowa realm, not just Hawkeyes, but Co Cornell in survived, because Co Cornell's one of the oldest series in the country, and Cornell's changed leagues, and they still kept that alive. And a category tried, where everybody, you're trying to make series and they just don't kind of work. Iowa State, West Virginia, I think, is one that, hey, they tried to make it a rivalry, but now it's not really a rivalry.
Has to happen organically. It really does.
Yeah. And then under died, where there is a lot of them there, but Iowa State, Missouri, it wasn't one of the main ones. Believe me, there are many more that above it, but they played, I think, 106 times, so, but as Jamie Pollard once told me, he goes, yeah, we really don't have anything in common other than we've played each other for a century. So.
Yeah, and there's that, it's a blurry line between like, what is and what isn't a rivalry, and what's just really been like Iowa, Illinois,
Yeah.
or more recently, we were talking about Northwestern. Iowa Northwestern's had some really good games, but rivalries are what they are. And like the Nebraska and Iowa rivalry, I mean, there's a chance that we saw it at its infancy, but when we're long gone, people won't remember that it started,
Yeah.
now,
Right.
in the during this time, 75 years from now, when we're long gone, people will be like, won't even be able to think about what it was like before there was an Iowa Nebraska rivalry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when every fan that's watched, five, holds up five for trophies, national titles at Nebraska, and all those people that watch those are, in the ground with us, and it's in the past, and it'll all be about the present and the future, and there's really a lot of steam here, and I think most Nebraska fans recognize that in the old Big Eight, their great rivalry, no question, was with Oklahoma. But those days are gone, and that was a different kind of rivalry. It wasn't heated necessarily. It was just because they played great games against one another for years. So that was a organic, wonderful rivalry for them. Colorado was a little different, but they looked uneven at each other historically. And Nebraska's tried that with Iowa, but it doesn't work because Iowa doesn't have any history with them. And Iowa's history is pretty good. And Iowa doesn't handle disrespect very well. I think we can all agree to that. When teams and fan bases try to disrespect Iowa, it doesn't work. So there you have this, this disdain for one another, and passion and vocal fandom that interacts and gets feisty. And so you see that. And so I think that it's going to be probably the series in 20 years, Rob. I think that's probably the series that maybe is the number one for Iowa. Minnesota's the oldest, greatest trophy. Wisconsin's most competitive. It's the closest in the Big Ten. Iowa State's within state borders, but we don't know what to predict of the Big 12 and maybe what schedules will shape out. But I think Iowa and Nebraska has the most potential. And if Nebraska can kind of get off the mat, I expect they will at some point. And if Iowa can continue to be a competitive program, and that one of those games matters to both teams equally, then I think you're looking at the potential to be, because I know I held this poll last year. I said, what team do you think is your biggest rival? And I think Wisconsin won, but it was close for Iowa fans. What team do you hate the most? It was no question. It was Nebraska. So I think that's where things can go there.
Nothing like good old fashioned hate to fuel a rivalry.
Yes.
Check out that series on The Athletic that Scott's got going on now, and the other members of the athletic staff have going on over there. It's a worthwhile investment. Great coverage throughout all of sports at The Athletic, so check them out. I think we've exhausted everything that we came to talk about for another week. Be here next week. We'll be that much closer to the Big Ten football media days in Indianapolis. Next week will be our last podcast before we head down there. So we'll look maybe a little bit more at that, what we expect to talk about here down there. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more news along the way on the Iowa beat for us to discuss. Did I forget anything, Scott?
I don't think so. I think we hit just about everything. I'm sure we'll miss something, or something will come up here in the next.
And something will come out here in a couple minutes after we stop recording. Some news will break.
Yeah, probably gambling or something, which I hope it does, because I really don't want that thing lingering much longer. But next week we also do talk to football players, on Tuesday. So we'll have a little more. A little bit more to share there. And, and again, the one thing that maybe we didn't mention is, players treasure their time away too. And that's their time away, before camp. So maybe there are a few that says, hey, I'll volunteer to do the Iowa one in midsummer. And if I can blow off the one in Indy, but
as they become veteran, they become more crafty and understand, like, hey, if I come out to the interview room right after the quarterback, there won't be as many people talking to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are
Yeah.
veteran moves we see when
Yeah.
we're at these media gatherings. But
Yeah.
yes, Tuesday we'll get some more Iowa football players to talk to. Look forward to that. Forward to talking to you folks next week. Want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors as well. And we'll be back next week on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Say goodbye, Scott.